I married a trans man just to keep my parents off my back. Now I've accidentally fallen in love with him. He moved into my room, started cuddling me, even joked about kissing me. Then one night, I finally kissed him for real. I am a gay man, and I come from a wealthy and traditional Asian family who are kinda homophobic. I have made it very clear to my family years ago that I would not marry a woman, but that I would not torment them by marrying a man. Hence, I would just stay single, and they would stay out of my business. That worked for about 4 years, with the exception of being called the F slur as a joke by my dad every time I saw him. Well, last year I went to visit, and they trapped me into a visit with this girl that was the single daughter of my dad's friend. We were both essentially left alone in a room, and we both did not want to be there. Anyway, the person was straight to the point and said, "Listen, I'm a trans man who has not yet gotten bottom surgery, and I do not want to marry you, and you do not want to be with me because I'm a man." I let him know I was actually gay. We became friends, and he found the whole thing hilarious, as did I. We exchanged numbers. My family was delighted I was being cured from my gayness. He was genuinely nice to talk to, so it was a good situation. As time went on, our families kept pushing for marriage between us. I don't know why, but we agreed, and very quickly got married just for the sole purpose of getting our families off our backs. This was in June last year. He moved to my country in August, and we just pulled a giant scam on our families and got away with it. He got a good thing out of it. Attending grad school, I would pay. He would live in the guest bedroom and live his life. I also had a good thing out of it, a wife, and no more cutting remarks about being gay. I also gave him my permission to cut his hair short and stop dressing feminine like his family forced him to. The reason for this was because in our culture, if a husband is okay with his wife doing something, her family can't say anything because her husband has authority and control over her. It's gross and misogynist and condescending, but it worked out for us. They can't say anything to his appearance even if they wanted to. Now, things have been smooth sailing for us. He started school, made friends, and is comfortable and happy. I work, come home, mind my business, and have a good roommate. But recently, starting around Christmas, we accidentally started getting closer. He started watching TV with me, eating with me, buying me stuff, texting me more frequently. He also moved into my room permanently last month. That has slowly escalated to us cuddling, both while awake and sleeping. Sometimes he will just sprawl out on top of me and cuddle me while doing random things, and I am unsure what it means. He's also started sitting in my lap and nuzzling me whenever I do something he thinks is cute. He also makes jokes about us dating and getting pets and showering together. I can never tell if he's serious because he jokes about everything. We also almost kissed twice, initiated by him while cuddling, but he goes red and jumps ship at the last minute and starts making jokes about how he's never do that. He also gets flustered around me, and he keeps commenting on how big and tall and strong I am because he's tiny. I understand why he might not kiss me. I'm scary looking, I'm not very expressive or talkative, and just let him speak because I like hearing him speak. And so when he initiates something and I look at him like a brick wall, he must think, I don't want this or something. How do I fix that? Nowadays, you can cut the romantic tension in this house with a knife, since we're constantly together. I would say I definitely feel something for him. I want to take him on dates and kiss him and let him speak as much as he wants and watch all the TV in the world with him. I want him to be happy, and I want myself to be happy. How can I show him that I like him? Update. I ended up working up the courage to confess how I feel to my husband. I think it came as a shock to him because, to be honest, I'm not one to ever express emotions. I remember very stoically asking him to sit down because I had something serious to talk about. I made some tea for the two of us while he was sitting, and I told him to be silent while I was making it. I could see how nervous he was. Sweat was literally dripping from his forehead despite it being January, and us having the heating turned off. A few minutes I sat down and confessed everything to him. I started by telling him that I have noticed how he is getting closer to me, how we are starting to cuddle, and how he has almost kissed me on 2 separate occasions. I told him that I've started to notice little things like his cheeks flushing when I call his name, or how I catch him moving his arms lower down my back each time we cuddle, once even getting very close to fondling my wiener over my boxers. I could see him getting more nervous with each sentence as I was saying this all to him in a very calm manner and showing almost no emotion. Before I could even finish speaking, he interrupted me to apologize and to tell me he will cut this behavior out. And then, in something like out of a movie, as he was speaking, I couldn't take it anymore. I leaned over and interrupted his apology with a long and passionate kiss. Not a quick peck, but a real, proper kiss. When I pulled back, my husband, Jin, was staring at me like I'd grown a second head. What was that? He whispered. I'm in love with you, I said. For real, not for our families, for me. For a moment, my husband, Jin, didn't move or speak. Then his face broke into the biggest smile I've ever seen. You absolute idiot, he he said. I've been throwing myself at you for months. I thought you were just tolerating me because we're stuck in this marriage. I explained that I thought he was just joking around. He admitted that the jokes were his way of testing the waters, seeing how I'd react. When I didn't react at all, he assumed I wasn't interested. So all this time, I started. We've both been pining like idiots. Gin finished. That night, we had our first real date. We ordered takeout, opened a bottle of wine, and talked for hours. Really talked about everything we'd been holding back. Gin admitted he'd started falling for me after seeing how I stood up to his family about his appearance. I confessed I realized my feelings during Christmas when I saw how happy he was decorating our home. It's been a month now, and everything has changed while also staying exactly the same. We still live together, still share a bed, still watch TV together, but now, when Jin crawls into my lap, I can kiss him without wondering if I'm misreading signals. When he makes jokes about our future together, I know he means them. We're still technically in a marriage of convenience as far as our families know. We haven't told them the truth, neither about our original arrangement nor about our real relationship now. That's a conversation for another day. For now, we're enjoying this private happiness that belongs only to us, something real and genuine that grew unexpectedly from what was supposed to be just a practical arrangement. For now, I'm just happy. Happier than I ever thought I could be. Turns out my husband isn't just my best friend anymore. He's actually my husband. And that's the best scam I never planned to pull off. After our conversation and that life-changing kiss, things between Jin and me shifted completely. That night we stayed up until 3 a.m. just talking about everything, our childhoods, our dreams, what we wanted from life. It was like the floodgates had opened. Jin admitted he'd been dropping hints for weeks because he was terrified of ruining our arrangement if I didn't feel the same way. I confessed that I'd been completely oblivious because I never thought someone as vibrant and funny as him would be interested in someone as stoic as me. For a smart guy, you're really stupid sometimes, he told me, poking my chest. That was Jin. Always teasing, always finding ways to make me smile, even when I was trying to be serious. The next morning, I woke up with Jin's arm draped across my chest and his head nestled against my shoulder, just like many mornings before. But this time, when he woke up and saw me looking at him, he didn't make a joke or pretend it was accidental. He just smiled sleepily and kissed my chin. "Morning, husband," he mumbled, and my heart did this weird flippy thing that I wasn't used to. The first couple of weeks of our new relationship were pretty much perfect. We fell into this comfortable routine where we'd wake up together, have breakfast, then go about our days. Jin would head to his classes, and I'd go to work. But now we'd text throughout the day, sending stupid memes or just checking in. When I'd get home, he'd usually be studying at the dining table, and he'd look up with this bright smile that made me feel like the most important person in the world. When February came around, I surprised Jin by leaving work early and setting up a proper romantic dinner. I'm not great at this stuff, but I wanted to make an effort. I ordered from his favorite restaurant, bought some candles, which I had to Google how to arrange, and even got him a small gift, a keychain with a little cartoon character from this show he loves. Nothing fancy, but I wanted it to be special for our first Valentine's Day. When Jin walked in and saw everything, he froze in the doorway. For a second, I thought I'd messed up, but then he dropped his backpack and launched himself at me, wrapping his arms around my neck. "You big softy," he said against my chest. And here, I thought I'd have to do all the romantic gestures in this relationship. That night, after dinner, we were cuddling on the couch when Jin got quiet, which is unusual for him since he normally talks non-stop. "Well, what's on your mind?" I asked, running my fingers through his hair. He hesitated, then said, "I want to start hormone therapy. I've been saving up and I think I'm ready." I was surprised not by the decision, but by the fact that he seemed nervous to tell me. "Okay, do you need help finding a doctor or with the costs?" He looked up at me, his expression a mix of relief and uncertainty. "You're really okay with it? I mean, it's going to change how I look, how I sound." "Jin, I married you knowing you're a man. I fell in love with you knowing you're a man. Whatever you need to do to feel more comfortable in your body, I support it." He started crying then, which freaked me out, because Jin never cries. He explained that he'd been putting it off, partly because he was worried about how I'd react. His ex-boyfriend had broken up with him when he first came out as trans, saying he wasn't signed up for that. Learning that made me both furious at his ex, and even more determined to show Jin he could trust me. The next day, I helped him research doctors in Singapore who specialized in transgender healthcare. It wasn't easy. Our country isn't exactly progressive on these issues, but we eventually found a clinic that could help. I went with him to his first appointment the following week. While we were in the waiting room, I noticed Jin fidgeting nervously with the zipper of his jacket. "You okay?" I asked. What if they say no? He whispered. What if they make me jump through a million hoops or decide I'm not trans enough or something? I took his hand, which was something I was still getting used to doing in public. Then we'll find another doctor, and another one after that if we have to. This is happening, Jin. I promise. The doctor turned out to be better than we expected. She was professional and respectful, walking Jin through the process and what to expect. She prescribed testosterone after confirming Jin understood the effects, and we left the clinic with his first prescription. In the taxi home, Jin clutched the paper like it was made of gold, and I don't think I'd ever seen him smile so wide. That evening, while we were making dinner, Jin suddenly asked, "What are we going to tell our families?" The question caught me off guard. I hadn't really thought about it. About us being actually together now? Or about your transition? Both, I guess. He chopped vegetables with more force than necessary. My parents are going to freak out when my voice starts dropping and I start growing facial hair. They already barely tolerate the short hair and boyish clothes. I considered this while stirring the sauce. We don't have to tell them anything right away. About us, I mean. That can be our thing for now. I paused. As for your transition, maybe we ease them into it. Start dropping hints that I like when you look more androgynous. Jin snorted. So basically use their misogyny and belief that I should obey my husband against them again? Exactly. He thought about it, then nodded. It's manipulative as hell, but it might work. At least until I'm further along and it becomes obvious. We decided to stick with that plan for the time being. Our marriage had started as a way to get our families off our backs, and now it was providing cover for Jin to transition safely. There was some irony there that wasn't lost on either of us. The next few months were a mix of incredible highs and unexpected challenges. Jin started his testosterone injections, which I helped him with because he hated needles. Every week, he'd sit on the bathroom counter, close his eyes tight, and grip my shoulder while I gave him the shot. Afterward, he'd always reward me with a kiss and call me his handsome nurse, which never failed to make me roll my eyes. The changes started subtly. His voice began to crack occasionally, which he found both exciting and embarrassing. He developed more energy and started hitting the gym with me a few times a week. Small patches of facial hair appeared, which he'd obsessively check in the mirror every morning. Each new change was celebrated between us like a major milestone. But it wasn't all smooth sailing. Jin experienced mood swings that caught us both off guard. Some days, he'd be irritable over the smallest things, like me leaving a cup on the counter or forgetting to buy his favorite snack. Other days, he'd get uncharacteristically quiet and withdrawn. I tried to be patient and understanding, reminding myself that his body was going through significant changes. One night in April, I came home to find Jin sitting on our bed with red-rimmed eyes. "What happened?" I asked, immediately concerned. "I called my mom today," he said, his voice rough. She kept asking why I sounded different, if I was sick. Then she started saying how she couldn't wait to see us next month for her birthday, and how she's been telling all her friends about her beautiful daughter and handsome son-in-law. I sat next to him and put my arm around his shoulders. "We don't have to go if you don't want to, but that's just it. I do want to see them. I miss them, but I'm not her daughter and I'm tired of pretending." He leaned against me. "I'm starting to think we need to tell them the truth, at least about me being trans, maybe not about our relationship starting as a scam." The thought of confronting our families made my stomach knot up. My parents had been so happy lately, telling everyone how their son had settled down with a nice girl. They'd stopped making homophobic comments, started including me in family events again. Things were easier than they'd been in years, but Jin was right. We couldn't keep hiding forever. "Okay," I said finally. "We'll tell them when we visit next month, together." Jin looked up at me, surprised. "Really? Just like that?" I shrugged. "You're my husband. For real now. If they can't accept who you are, that's their problem, not ours." He kissed me then, holding my face in his hands like I was something precious. "I love you, you know that? Like really fucking love you." It was the first time either of us had said those words, and hearing them made everything else, all the worry about our families, all the challenges ahead, seem manageable. The weeks leading up to our visit to Jin's parents were tense. Jin's physical changes were becoming more noticeable. His jawline was sharper, his voice had dropped significantly, and he had the beginnings of a mustache that he decided not to shave before our trip. We were done hiding. We flew to Jin's hometown on a Friday morning. On the plane, Jin kept bouncing his leg nervously, so I placed my hand on his knee to steady him. "It's going to be okay," I said, though I wasn't entirely convinced myself. "You don't know my parents like I do," he replied. "They're traditional. Doesn't even begin to cover it." When we arrived at Jin's parents' house, his mother opened the door with a wide smile that quickly faltered when she saw Jin. She recovered quickly, pulling him into a hug that seemed a bit stiff. "You look different," she said, her eyes scanning his face, taking in the subtle beard, the more angular features. Jin's father was less subtle. He stared openly, his expression a mix of confusion and disapproval. What happened to your face? He asked bluntly. You look like a boy. Jin took a deep breath. We need to talk. The conversation that followed was one of the most uncomfortable experiences of my life. We sat in their living room, Jin's voice steady as he explained that he was transgender, that he had always been a man, and that he was now on hormone therapy. His parents listened in stunned silence. When Jin finished speaking, his mother burst into tears. But you're my daughter, she kept saying. My beautiful daughter. His father turned to me, anger etched into every line of his face. You did this, he accused. You encouraged this madness. I kept my expression neutral, though inside I was seething. I supported Jin in being who he truly is. That's what a good husband does. That statement seemed to confuse Jin's father. In his mind, a good husband would never let his wife do something like this. The cognitive dissonance was written all over his face. The rest of the evening was tense. Jin's mother kept crying intermittently, while his father barely spoke, just glared at us from across the dinner table. We'd planned to stay for 3 days, but by bedtime, Jin whispered to me that he wanted to leave first thing in the morning. That night, as we lay in Jin's childhood bedroom, I held him while he cried quietly against my chest. I knew it would be bad, he said between sniffles, but part of me hoped. They've had years to get used to the idea. I've been dropping hints since I was a teenager. I didn't know what to say to make it better, so I just held him tighter and promised we'd get through this together. The next morning, Jin's mother knocked on our door. Her eyes were puffy from crying, but she seemed calmer. Your father and I talked all night, she said to Jin. We don't understand this choice, but you're our child. We need time, but we don't want to lose you. It wasn't acceptance, not really, but it was a start. We agreed to stay for breakfast before catching an earlier flight home. The meal was awkward, with Jin's father barely speaking and his mother making stilted attempts at normal conversation, but they were trying in their own way. As we were leaving, Jin's mother hugged him goodbye. No matter what, I love you, she whispered, just loud enough for me to hear. In the taxi to the airport, Jin was quiet, processing everything that had happened. That went better than I expected, he finally said. And also worse. I squeezed his hand. They didn't disown you. That's something. Yeah, he looked out the window. Now, we just have to tell your family. The thought made my stomach drop. My family was a different beast entirely. Where Jin's parents were openly emotional, mine were coldly judgmental. Where his might eventually come around through love, mine might calculate the social cost and decide we weren't worth the potential embarrassment. We decided to visit my parents the following weekend. Rip the Band-Aid off all at once, Jin said. But when I called to arrange the visit, my mother had other ideas. Oh, we're coming to you, she said cheerfully. Your father has business in Singapore next week, and we thought we'd stay with you and Jin for a few days. Won't that be nice? It's been months since we've seen you both. I tried to dissuade her, suggesting a hotel might be more comfortable, but she wouldn't hear of it. Nonsense. We want to see how our children are living. I want to make sure you're eating properly. After hanging up, I relayed the news to Jin, who looked like he might throw up. They're going to be staying here, in our apartment, while I look like this? He gestured to his increasingly masculine appearance. It'll be fine, I said, not believing it myself. They have to find out, eventually. The next week was a flurry of cleaning and preparing. Jin was a nervous wreck, alternating between wanting to fem up to avoid conflict and being determined to present as his true self. In the end, authenticity won out. He wasn't going back in the closet for anyone, not even my parents. When my parents arrived, my mother immediately embraced Jin, then pulled back with a puzzled expression. You look different, she said, echoing Jin's mother from the week before. Are you ill? Jin smiled tightly. No, just some changes. I'll explain over dinner. My father, ever oblivious to subtle social cues, boomed. Well, you look like a boy with that haircut. Our son needs to take you shopping for some proper clothes. Jin and I exchanged glances. This was going to be even more difficult than we thought. During dinner, which Jin had spent hours preparing to make a good impression, the tension was thick enough to cut with a knife. My mother kept making comments about how mannish Jin looked, clearly disapproving but trying to be polite about it. My father was his usual tactless self, asking why Jin's voice was so deep and if he was coming down with something. Finally, after my father made a joke about Jin looking more like my boyfriend than my wife, Jin set down his fork with a clatter. I need to tell you both something, he said firmly. I'm transgender. I'm a man. I've always been a man. And now I'm taking steps to align my body with who I've always been. The silence that followed was deafening. My mother's face drained of color, while my father's turned an alarming shade of red. Is this some kind of joke? My father finally asked, his voice dangerously quiet. No, sir, Jin replied, his tone respectful but unwavering. I've known since I was a child. Your son has been incredibly supportive. All eyes turned to me. I straightened my spine and met my father's gaze. Jin is my husband, and I support him completely. My father slammed his hand on the table, making the dishes rattle. This is outrageous. We agreed to you marrying a woman to avoid the shame of you being with a man, and now you tell us your wife is actually a man? Do you think this is funny? Do you enjoy making fools of us? Dad, it's not like that. I started, but he cut me off. I don't want to hear it. This is sick. He trailed off, seemingly unable to find words strong enough to express his disgust. My mother, always the practical one, asked in a trembling voice, "What will we tell people? What will the family say?" Jin, to his credit, remained calm. "You can tell them the truth, or you can lie. That's your choice. But this is who I am, and that's not changing." My father stood up abruptly. "We're leaving. I can't stay in this mockery of a home." My mother hesitated, looking torn between following my father and staying to try to understand. In the end, family loyalty won out, and she hurried after him, pausing only briefly at the door to give me a look I couldn't quite decipher: disappointment, confusion, or perhaps a hint of sorrow. After they left, Jin and I sat in stunned silence for a few minutes. Then Jin got up and started clearing the dishes, his movements mechanical. "I'm sorry," I said, standing to help him. "I knew they'd react badly, but that was, It's not your fault," Jin interrupted, but his voice was flat. "You can't control how they respond." That night, Jin was uncharacteristically quiet. He went to bed early, claiming a headache, but I could tell he was avoiding talking about what had happened. I gave him space, figuring we could process everything in the morning. But when I woke up, Jin wasn't in bed. I found him in the kitchen, already dressed and making coffee. "Hey," I said cautiously. "You okay?" He handed me a mug without meeting my eyes. "Jin's mom called while you were asleep. She wants to have lunch with us today, just her, not Jin's dad." I was surprised. "What did you say?" I said yes. He finally looked at me. "I think we should hear her out." We met Jin's mother at a quiet restaurant near our apartment. She looked tired, like she hadn't slept much. As soon as we sat down, she reached across the table and took Jin's hand. "I want to understand," she said simply. "Help me understand." Jin explained gender dysphoria, his experiences growing up, knowing he was different, the relief he felt when he finally accepted he was transgender. His mother listened attentively, asking occasional questions, but never interrupting. When Jin finished, his mother was quiet for a long moment. Then she said, "I always wanted a daughter-in-law. I had dreams of shopping together, of helping plan your wedding, of you giving me grandchildren someday." Jin tensed beside me, but his mother continued. "But what I really wanted was for my son to be happy, and watching you two together, I can see that he is happier than I've ever seen him." She turned to me. "You've always been so serious, so closed off, even as a child. But with Jin, you smile, you laugh, you seem alive." I felt my throat tighten with emotion I wasn't used to showing. "I am happy, Mom. Jin makes me happy." My mother nodded, then turned back to Jin. "I don't understand everything about this transgender business. I probably never will. Not completely, but I understand love. And if my son loves you, the real you, then that's what matters." Jin was crying now, quiet tears sliding down his cheeks. "Thank you," he whispered. "Your father will take longer," my mother warned. "He's stubborn and set in his ways, but I'll work on him. Just give us time." When we got home, Jin collapsed onto the couch, emotionally drained. "That went better than I expected," he said, pulling me down next to him. "My mom has always been more reasonable than my dad," I replied, wrapping an arm around him. "She might come around. My dad, though." Jin nodded, understanding the unspoken concern. "One step at a time, right?" The next few weeks were a roller coaster. Jin's parents called every few days, asking stilted questions about his transition, clearly trying to understand even if they didn't approve. My mother called too, checking in on us and reporting that my father was still furious but at least no longer talking about disowning me. Through it all, Jin and I grew closer. The shared adversity seemed to strengthen our bond. We started talking more seriously about our future, not just getting through the current family drama, but what we wanted long term. Jin talked about wanting to get top surgery after finishing his degree. I admitted I'd been thinking about looking for a job in a more progressive country, somewhere we could live openly without as much judgment. But then, just as things seemed to be settling into a new normal, Jin's mother called with news that sent our lives into chaos again. "Your uncle saw your Facebook page," she said, her voice tight with anxiety. "He's telling everyone in the family that you're not really a woman. Your father is beside himself. People are asking questions. What do we tell them?" Jin was silent for a moment, then said firmly, "Tell them the truth, Mom. And tell them your son is happily married and living his authentic life." The call ended tensely, and Jin threw his phone onto the couch in frustration. "They're never going to accept me, are they?" he said, more to himself than to me. I didn't know how to answer that. I wanted to reassure him, but I also didn't want to give false hope. So instead, I just held him, letting him vent his frustration and disappointment. The following weekend, we were grocery shopping when Jin's phone rang again. It was his father. Jin answered hesitantly, putting the call on speaker so I could hear. "Your mother and I have been talking," his father said, his voice gruff. "We've decided we want to come visit, to see for ourselves how you're living." Jin looked at me, eyes wide with surprise. "When?" "Next weekend, if that works for you both." After hanging up, Jin stood frozen in the middle of the produce section. "They want to visit, voluntarily, to see how we live." "Is that good or bad?" I asked, uncertain. "I don't know," Jin admitted, "but I guess we'll find out." The week leading up to Jin's parents' visit was as stressful as the lead up to my parents' visit, if not more so. Jin bounced between optimism that they were coming around and fear that they were planning some kind of intervention. I tried to keep him grounded, reminding him that whatever happened, we had each other. Jin's parents arrived on Friday evening. There was an awkward moment at the door when his father hesitated before hugging him, clearly still adjusting to his son's increasingly masculine appearance. But the fact that he hugged Jin at all felt like progress. Over dinner, Jin's mother revealed the reason for their visit. "We've been doing some research," she said tentatively, "about transgender people. We found some support groups for parents. We've been talking to other families." Jin nearly dropped his fork in shock. "You have?" His father nodded stiffly. "Your mother thought it would help us understand, and it has somewhat." He cleared his throat. "We met a couple whose son, who was born their daughter, has been living as a man for 15 years. He's married, has a good job, he's happy." He looked at Jin directly. "Is that what you want? To be happy?" "Yes," Jin said simply. "That's all I've ever wanted." His father nodded again. "Then we will try to support you. It won't be easy for us. We have a lot to unlearn, but you're our son, and we don't want to lose you." Jin started crying then, and his mother came around the table to hug him. It wasn't perfect acceptance. There was still awkwardness in how they addressed him, still discomfort in their expressions when they looked at his changing appearance. But it was a beginning. That night, after his parents had gone to their hotel, Jin sat on our bed, looking stunned. "Did that really happen?" he asked. "Did my dad actually call me his son?" I sat next to him, taking his hand. "He did. They're trying, Jin. They love you." Jin leaned against me. "If only your dad could make the same effort." I sighed, thinking of my father's continued silence. My mother had been calling regularly, but my father refused to speak to me. "He'll come around or he won't. Either way, we'll be okay." The next day, we took Jin's parents on a tour of our neighborhood, showing them our favorite spots. It was strange but nice, this tentative new family dynamic. Jin's father still stumbled over pronouns occasionally, quickly correcting himself with a gruff apology. His mother had brought old photo albums, which initially made Jin tense, but she surprised us by saying she wanted to create new ones to document your journey, she explained. We were having lunch at a local restaurant when my phone rang. It was my mother. I stepped outside to take the call. "Your father wants to talk to you," she said without preamble. "He's ready to listen." I was stunned. "What brought this on?" I showed him some articles, made him talk to Pastor Lee. "You remember him? His son came out as gay last year. I've been working on him." She paused. "He's still not happy about the situation, but he misses you, and he knows you well enough to know you wouldn't make this choice lightly." I returned to the table in a daze, telling Jin and his parents about the call. "That's wonderful!" Jin's mother exclaimed. "Maybe our families can meet again, start fresh with the truth this time." It was an optimistic suggestion, maybe too optimistic, given how explosive our last family gathering had been. But Jin squeezed my hand under the table, a silent communication that he was willing to try if I was. The rest of the weekend with Jin's parents went surprisingly well. By the time they left on Sunday, there was a new ease between us all. Not complete understanding, perhaps, but a willingness to try. The following weekend, we visited my parents. It was tense at first. My father was clearly uncomfortable, his greetings stiff and formal. But as the afternoon progressed, I noticed him watching Jin and me together, seeing how naturally we interacted, how Jin made me laugh in ways few people could. At dinner, my father finally addressed the elephant in the room. "So you're transgender," he said to Jin, the word sounding foreign on his tongue. Jin nodded. "Yes, sir. I've known since I was a child." My father was quiet for a moment, then asked, "And our son? When did he know about this?" "From the beginning," Jin replied honestly. "It was never a secret between us." My father turned to me, his expression unreadable. "And you're happy with this arrangement?" I met his gaze steadily. "I'm happier than I've ever been. Jin is my husband in every way that matters, Dad. I love him." My father flinched slightly at my use of male pronouns for Jin, but he didn't object. He nodded slowly, seeming to process this information. "Your mother tells me this isn't a choice," he said, finally. "That people are born this way." "That's right," Jin confirmed. "It's not something I chose. It's who I am." My father sighed heavily. "I don't understand it. I don't know if I ever will." He looked between us, his expression softening slightly. "But you're my son, and if this is the life you've chosen, I won't stand in your way." It wasn't wholehearted acceptance. It wasn't even close, but from my father, it was significant. An olive branch, a willingness to try. As we drove home that night, Jin was quiet, reflecting on the massive shifts that had occurred in our lives over the past few weeks. "Do you think they'll ever fully accept us?" he asked as we neared our apartment. I considered the question carefully. "I think they'll get there, eventually. Maybe not 100%, but enough. They love us in their own ways." Jin nodded, leaning his head against the window. "It's more than I expected, honestly. I was prepared for them to cut us off completely." "Me too," I admitted. "But people can surprise you, sometimes in good ways." As we entered our apartment, Jin suddenly turned to me with a serious expression. "Thank you," he said quietly. "For what?" "For standing by me through all of this. For not making me face it alone." He wrapped his arms around my waist. for being the best fake husband who turned into the best real husband. I held him close, realizing how lucky I was that our fake marriage had turned into something so genuine and precious. What had started as a convenient arrangement to appease our families had become the most real thing in my life. "So what now?" I asked, my chin resting on top of his head. Jin looked up at me with a smile. "Now we just live our lives, together, for real, this time." And that's exactly what we did. The road ahead wouldn't be perfect. There would be more awkward family gatherings, more explanations to confused relatives, more adjustments as Jin continued his transition, but we'd face it all together, no longer pretending, no longer hiding. What began as a scam had become something neither of us had expected to find: a real marriage, a real partnership, and a love that was strong enough to weather whatever came our way. That night, after Jin and I agreed to face our future together, I had this moment where everything just felt right, like all the pieces had fallen into place. I'm not usually sentimental, but lying there with Jin sleeping against my chest, I realized how lucky I was that our fake marriage had turned into something real. The next few months flew by. Jin continued his hormone therapy, and the changes became more noticeable each week. His voice dropped completely, settling into this nice deep tone that still had a hint of his original pitch. He started growing more facial hair, which he was stupidly proud of even though it came in patchy at first. Every morning, he'd examine his face in the mirror, calling me over to look at some new hair that had appeared overnight. "Look," he'd say, pointing at what was basically peach fuzz. "It's coming in thicker on this side." I'd nod seriously while secretly finding his excitement adorable. Jin caught me smiling once and flicked water at me. "Don't patronize me! This is a big deal!" By summer, Jin had been on T for almost 6 months, and the changes were really settling in. His shoulders had broadened slightly, his jawline was sharper, and he had this light scruff that he kept meticulously trimmed. He looked good, really good. And even though I'd fallen for him before all these changes, seeing him become more comfortable in his own skin made me fall even harder. In July, Jin scheduled a consultation for top surgery. He'd been saving up and researching surgeons for months, and he finally found one in Thailand with good reviews and reasonable prices. The consultation was virtual, and Jin was so nervous, he made me sit with him the whole time. The surgeon was professional and kind, explaining the procedure and recovery process. When he asked Jin why he wanted the surgery, Jin squeezed my hand so hard I thought he might break it. "I've known I was a man since I was 12, he said, his voice steady despite his nerves. "I want my outside to match who I am inside." The surgeon nodded, saying Jin was an excellent candidate. We scheduled the surgery for October, giving us time to arrange travel and for Jin to finish his summer semester. After the call ended, Jin burst into tears, happy tears. He explained when I panicked, hugging me so tight I could barely breathe. It's really happening," he kept saying. "It's finally happening." That night, Jin called his parents to tell them about the surgery. They'd been making progress in accepting him, but surgery was a big step. I sat next to him, ready to offer support if needed. "Mom," Jin said after exchanging pleasantries, "I've scheduled my top surgery for October." There was a pause on the other end. Then Jin's mother said, "Will you need help during recovery? Your father and I could come stay with you for a week or two." Jin nearly dropped the phone in shock. You want to help?" "Of course," his mother replied, sounding slightly offended. "You're our son. We want to make sure you're taken care of." After hanging up, Jin just sat there, looking stunned. "They offered to help," he said like he couldn't quite believe it. "They called me their son without hesitating. I called my parents next. My mom was supportive as always, but my dad was still working through his feelings about everything. When I told him about Jin's surgery, he was quiet for a moment. "Will he be all right?" he finally asked, genuine concern in his voice. "These surgeries, they're safe?" "Yes, Dad," I assured him. "The surgeon has an excellent reputation." "Good," he said gruffly. "Let us know if you need anything." It wasn't exactly overwhelming enthusiasm, but for my father, it was significant progress. He was trying, in his own way. As October approached, Jin grew both excited and nervous. He'd finished his summer courses with excellent grades and was taking the fall semester off to recover from surgery. We booked our flights to Thailand and arranged for a 3-week stay, 1 week before the surgery for pre-op appointments, and 2 weeks after for initial recovery before flying home. The night before we left, Jin was a bundle of nerves, packing and repacking his suitcase. "What if something goes wrong?" he asked, folding the same shirt for the 3rd time. "What if the results aren't good? What if—" I took the shirt from his hands and set it aside, then pulled him into a hug. "Everything will be fine," I said, firmly. "The surgeon knows what he's doing, and I'll be with you the whole time." Jin relaxed against me slightly. "Promise?" "Promise." The flight to Thailand was long but uneventful. Jin slept most of the way, his head on my shoulder, while I caught up on work emails. We'd booked a nice apartment in Bangkok for our stay, wanting to make sure Jin would be comfortable during recovery. The pre-op appointments went smoothly. The surgeon examined Jin, confirmed the surgical plan, and answered all our questions patiently. The night before the surgery, Jin was surprisingly calm. "I've waited so long for this," he explained when I commented on his changed demeanor. "Now that it's finally happening, I just feel ready." The morning of the surgery, I woke up before Jin. I watched him sleeping peacefully, his chest rising and falling under the thin sheet. Soon, that chest would be transformed, flatter, more masculine, more aligned with who he truly was. I felt a surge of pride for his courage, for his determination to live authentically despite all the obstacles. When Jin woke up, he caught me watching him and smiled sleepily. "Creep," he teased, reaching out to touch my face. "What are you thinking about so seriously this early?" "Just that I love you," I said, simply. Jin's smile widened. "Good timing. I love you too." At the hospital, things moved quickly. Jin changed into a gown, the surgical site was marked, and final questions were answered. When it was time for him to go into the operating room, he kissed me quickly. "See you on the other side," he said with a nervous smile. "I'll be right here," I promised. The surgery took about 3 hours. I spent the time pacing the waiting room, checking emails without really reading them, and drinking terrible coffee. When the surgeon finally came out to tell me everything had gone perfectly, I nearly collapsed with relief. They kept Jin overnight for observation. He was groggy from the anesthesia and pain medication, drifting in and out of sleep. I stayed by his bed, holding his hand whenever he was awake enough to recognize me. "Did they do it?" he asked at one point, his words slurred. "Yes," I assured him. "Everything went great." He smiled dopily before falling back asleep. The next day, we were able to return to our apartment. Jin was in pain, but managing it well with medication. He couldn't see the results yet because of the compression vest and bandages, but the surgeon had shown us photos taken during the procedure, and the results looked promising. Recovery was harder than either of us expected. Jin was uncomfortable and frustrated by his limited mobility. He couldn't raise his arms above his shoulders, couldn't shower properly, and needed help with the most basic tasks. I did my best to keep him comfortable, changing his bandages, helping him eat, and making sure he took his medication on schedule. "I'm sorry you have to do all this," Jin said on the third day, watching me change his dressings. "Don't be ridiculous," I replied. "This is what husbands do." He smiled at that, reaching for my hand. "You're really good at it. Being a husband, I mean." A week after surgery, Jin had his first post-op appointment. The surgeon removed the bandages, and Jin got to see his chest for the first time. I watched his face as the bandages came away, saw his eyes widen and fill with tears. "It's perfect," he whispered, staring at his reflection. There were scars, of course, and some swelling, but the shape was exactly what he'd hoped for. Flat, masculine, with the nipples properly positioned. The surgeon seemed pleased with the results and the healing progress. He gave us updated care instructions and scheduled another checkup before we were due to fly home. That evening, back at the apartment, Jin kept sneaking glances at himself in the mirror. "I can't believe it's really me," he said, touching his chest gently. "I've dreamed about this for so long." The next few days were easier as Jin's pain decreased and his mobility improved. By the time of our final appointment, he was moving more freely and had stopped needing pain medication except at night. The surgeon gave us clearance to fly home, along with detailed instructions for continued care. On our last night in Thailand, we went out for a proper dinner, our first real outing since the surgery. Jin wore a button-up shirt, unbuttoned just enough to show the top of his chest. He kept touching it unconsciously throughout the meal, like he still couldn't quite believe it was real. "Happy?" I asked, watching him. "You have no idea," he replied, his smile bright enough to light up the room. When we got back to Singapore, Jin's parents were waiting at the airport, having flown in to help with his recovery as promised. They'd prepared our apartment, stocking the fridge and arranging the bedroom with extra pillows to keep Jin comfortable. The reunion was emotional. Jin's mother hugged him carefully, mindful of his surgery site, then stepped back to look at him properly. "You look so handsome," she said, her voice wavering slightly. "So much like your uncle when he was young." Jin's father was more reserved, but clasped Jin's shoulder gently. "Welcome home, son." My parents visited a few days later. My mother brought food and fussed over Jin's comfort. My father was awkward but trying, asking Jin how he was feeling and if the surgeon had done good work. Progress, slow but steady. As Jin recovered, we settled back into our routine, but with subtle differences. Jin carried himself differently now, more confidently, more comfortably in his own skin. He started working out again once he got clearance from his doctor, focusing on building his upper body. He took silly shirtless selfies in the bathroom mirror, so proud of his healing chest that I couldn't even tease him about it. In December, just before Christmas, Jin finished his first semester of his second year of graduate school with straight A's. We celebrated with a small dinner party, inviting both our families. It was the first time they'd all been together since everything had come out in the open, and I was nervous about how it would go. But surprisingly, it went well. There were a few awkward moments, especially when my father misgendered Jin, then corrected himself with a flustered apology. But overall, it was a pleasant evening. Our families found common ground in their shared experiences as parents trying to understand their children's lives. They exchanged phone numbers by the end of the night, promising to keep in touch. After everyone left, Jin and I collapsed on the couch, exhausted but relieved. "That wasn't a complete disaster," Jin observed, leaning against me. "High praise," I replied, making him laugh. "Seriously, though," he said, turning to face me. "Did you ever imagine we'd get here when we first got married, I mean?" I thought about it. No, I admitted. I thought we'd live as roommates for a few years, maybe eventually go our separate ways once the pressure from our families died down. Jin nodded. Me too. I never expected. He gestured between us. This, United States, being real. I pulled him closer. I'm glad we were wrong. On New Year's Eve, we hosted another gathering, this time with friends rather than family. Jin's classmates from grad school, a few of my colleagues who'd become friends, people who knew and accepted us as we were. We filled our apartment with laughter and music, and as midnight approached, I found myself watching Jin from across the room. He was telling a story to a small group, gesturing animatedly. His face lit up with laughter. He looked so happy, so completely himself. The contrast with the nervous hiding person I'd first met was striking. When the countdown to midnight began, Jin made his way through the crowd to find me. He wrapped his arms around my neck as everyone shouted, 3, 2, 1, Happy New Year! As cheers erupted around us, Jin kissed me, long and sweet. Happy anniversary, he whispered against my lips. I looked at him, confused. Our wedding was in June, he smiled. Not that anniversary. It's been exactly 1 year since you kissed me and told me you were in love with me. For real. I was stunned that he remembered the exact date. You're such a sap, I said, but I was smiling too. You love it, he replied confidently. I do, I admitted. I love you. The next morning, after our guests had gone and we were lazing in bed, Jin propped himself up on one elbow to look at me. I've been thinking, he said, suddenly serious, about our wedding. My stomach dropped. What about it? It wasn't real, he said simply. It was a scam to fool our families. I nodded, unsure where he was going with this. I think we should do it again, he continued. For real this time, a proper wedding with people who know and accept us, where we actually mean the vows we say. I stared at him, processing this suggestion. You want to renew our vows? I want to marry you properly, he corrected. As myself, as the man I've always been. I thought about it for a moment, then nodded. Okay, let's do it. Jin's face broke into a wide smile. Really? Just like that? I shrugged. Why not? We're already legally married. This would be for us, not for the paperwork. Jin lunged forward to hug me, nearly knocking me off the bed in his enthusiasm. I'm going to plan the best fake real wedding ever, he declared. And that's exactly what he did. Over the next 6 months, Jin threw himself into wedding planning with characteristic energy. We decided on a small ceremony in June, exactly 2 years after our original wedding. The guest list would be limited to close friends and supportive family members. Jin's parents embraced the idea wholeheartedly, seeming to view it as a chance to make up for missing out on their son's authentic identity the first time around. My parents were more reserved, but agreed to attend. My father even awkwardly offered to help with expenses, which I took as a significant peace offering. In the months leading up to the ceremony, other aspects of our lives continued to evolve. Jin finished his second year of grad school with excellent grades and started looking at internships for his final year. I received a promotion at work, which meant longer hours, but better pay. We began talking about buying a place of our own instead of renting, maybe somewhere with a small garden for Jin's growing plant collection. Before we knew it, our wedding day arrived. We kept it simple, an intimate ceremony in a garden pavilion, followed by dinner at a nice restaurant. Jin wore a tailored suit that showed off his broader shoulders and flat chest. I wore a suit too, though Jin had insisted on choosing the color for me, claiming I had no sense of style whatsoever. As we stood facing each other exchanging vows we'd written ourselves this time, I was struck by how different this felt from our first wedding. That day had been tense, filled with secret glances and hidden meanings. This time, everything was open and honest. I promise to always be your partner in crime, Jin said, grinning as our guests laughed, knowing the story of how we'd met and married. But more importantly, I promise to be your partner in everything else too, in the good days and the bad ones, in the big moments and the small ones. When it was my turn, I surprised myself by how easily the words came. I never thought I'd find someone who understands me the way you do, I said, holding Jin's hands tightly. Someone who sees past my silence and knows what I'm thinking. Someone who makes me laugh and makes me brave. I love you, not despite the journey that brought us together, but because of it. Jin's eyes were wet as he leaned in to kiss me after we were pronounced husband and husband. Our friends and family applauded, and I felt something settle in my chest, a sense of rightness, of completion. At the dinner afterward, Jin's father gave a toast that left hardly a dry eye in the room. 2 years ago, I thought I was losing a daughter, he said, his voice thick with emotion. Instead, I gained a son who is braver and stronger than I ever imagined, and I gained another son as well. He nodded to me. I've never seen two people more perfectly matched. My father, not to be outdone, stood up next. I didn't understand any of this at first, he admitted bluntly. I still don't understand all of it, but I understand love when I see it, and these two have the real thing. Later, as Jin and I shared our first dance, he rested his head against my chest. We pulled off quite a scam, he murmured, referencing our original marriage plot. The best scam ever, I agreed, holding him close. It scammed us too. Jin looked up at me, his expression soft. How so? We thought we were tricking everyone else, but we ended up tricking ourselves, pretending to be in love until we actually fell in love. Jin laughed. That's either very romantic or very stupid. With us, probably both, I replied, making him laugh harder. As I held my husband, my real, true husband, in my arms, surrounded by people who loved and accepted us, I couldn't help but feel grateful for that ridiculous, arranged meeting our parents had set up 2 years ago. What had started as an attempt to please our families while secretly rebelling had become the most authentic relationship either of us had ever known. Sometimes the best things in life come from the most unexpected beginnings. Our marriage might have started as a convenient arrangement, a mutual agreement to get our families off our backs. But somewhere along the way, between the late-night conversations and shared secrets, the support through transition and the standing up to our families, it had become something real and precious, and I wouldn't change a single moment of it.